Well, hello. Welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast, where we talk with writers from all mediums and genres about themselves, their work, and advice they have for writers. I'm your host, Paul Zeidman, and my guest today is, I think this might be his third time on the show. Boy, all of the job titles this man has had: writer, stand-up comedian, comic book writer, podcast host. Can only be referring to the one and only Chris Mancini. Chris, welcome back to the Creative Writing Life podcast.
Thanks, Paul. Good to be back. I didn't realize it was three. So wow, we're really racking them up. That's
Oh yeah,
triple play. Nice.
exactly. Yeah, we'll try to come up with some kind of special award.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be talking to Chris in just a bit about his new graphic novel, Long Ago and Far Away 2, Part 1. That is a lengthy title, but we're going to go
It
into all the
is.
details about that. So as those familiar with the show, we like to start things off talking about anything we may have read or watched lately. If we liked it, we didn't like it, we're kind of indifferent about it, or I don't want to ever hear or see that again. I'll go first just to give Chris a little moment to collect his thoughts. Saw two things over the weekend. My local cinema, they've been on a noir kick lately, so they showed one of Stanley Kubrick's earliest films, The Killing, which is a really taut heist movie set about these gangsters who try to rob a racetrack. And Sterling Hayden is the head bad guy, and the only other person I really recognized was Elisha Cook, who is one of the underlings. He was in the Maltese Falcon. He played that seedy, slimy kind of character in a lot of noir films. But that's a tight hour and like 32-minute film, and it was just over like that. But I really enjoyed it, and I just finished watching on now the redubbed HBO Max, the two-part documentary, Pee-wee as Himself, which looks at Paul Rubens. The first half is pretty much how he got his start and how Pee-wee Herman came to be, and the second half is pretty much after he became super famous, and then the slow, steady downhill journey that he took. It's devastating to watch the further along it gets, especially with all the scandals that he went through and his health. And it's what a contrast to the first one, which is all uh, weird humor and hopeful and comedy, and the second one is just it gets more and more depressing the more you watch it. And on that happy note,
So
Chris,
you got to watch them in reverse order. So you should
well,
watch the first,
you
the
could.
second.
Well, the thing is, he died like 2 years ago. So the second half ends with him passing away. So it's like, oh, he's resurrected and he comes back as Paul Rubens slash Pee Wee Herman. That's one way to look at it if you want to take a metaphysical approach to it. Chris, what about you on the reading and or watching front?
Well, I saw two like very different movies on both sides of the extremes. I saw a low budget horror movie called Caveat, and it came out a couple of years ago. I think it's on Shudder now, and it was really good. It was one of those low budget independent. I think it's a British film, and it does some really cool psychological things like it's a kind of a haunted house movie, but there's only like three characters, compressed time, and you have one location, but it's an extremely creepy location, and it goes into like, well, are these people crazy? Is the house really haunted? And why did this guy agree to be literally chained into the house? Because like the girl that he's supposed to watch is scared that like, she'll get attacked at night. So his chain goes all around the house but can't reach her room. So it's this weird, but it keeps you like on the edge of your like seat because then she has this weird um doll that's like a bunny with a drum, and then she walks around with it. Then it seems like it starts drumming when there's like paranormal activity near, and so it's got all of these elements. But what I like about it is that it keeps you kind of like guessing, but not in a bad way. Like you could tell like the filmmakers, the writers, and the director knew exactly what they were doing and what they wanted you to see or feel. It wasn't like a random thing. Oh, we'll just throw this like American Horror Story. We'll just
Hmm.
throw this in here. We'll just throw this in here, and we'll make it gross and weird, and then nothing will tie together. This one definitely tied together, and it was just really fun and creepy and weird. And there's very little special effects, if there are any. If they are, they're super subtle.
Okay.
But it reminded me like if you go years back to the original The Haunting movie, where it
Yeah.
was all, you never saw anything, but it was still scary, especially for the time.
And it was all sound
And
effects.
yes, and it was all sound effects. There's a lot of like weird, they do a lot of weird things with sound effects, which is really good too. Like there's one exposition at the beginning, like because they're on an island that nobody's on, and this decrepit house is on, and like have you ever heard what a fox sounds like when it screams or when it cries? And they're like, well, no, I haven't. It goes, it sounds like a teenage girl screaming. I'm like, what? What? Why? Why would you say that? And why would I know that? But then, sure enough, like there's subtle parts, of course, in the soundtrack where that actually happens, and you're like, is that someone screaming? Oh no, they're mentioning the foxes. But
Is it
uh,
kind of have like a tongue-in-cheek approach? I mean, is it a
it
kind
is
of
not.
it's all serious?
It's all serious,
Okay.
creepy, weird, and it gives you a sense of unease and a sense of dread throughout the entire movie. So it's an hour and a
Wow.
half of like, this is making me uncomfortable, but in a good way, because you don't know what's going to happen or what these characters are going to do. One of them has amnesia and then slowly starts to regain their memory. There's a murder mystery and there's a lot of
Wow.
things, but it's not like kitchen sinky. It's a lot of things that tie together and make sense and it will creep you out. So if you
So
want to
it sounds much more suspenseful than horror, is what the vibe I'm getting.
it's a mix like that.
Okay.
It's a lot of suspense, but also like that creepy dread because you don't know if something crazy or is going to happen
Okay.
next. But it's good. So definitely check it out. And the other one, of course, I saw was Superman over the weekend, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I mean, I'm a James Gunn fan. Was it perfect? No. I mean, speaking of kitchen sinky, there was a lot of kitchen sinky stuff in it, but I didn't care. I mean, I was a fan, and what I liked about it too these reboots happen a lot of times. I mean, how many times did we have to sit through Spider-Man's origin story until they
Or the
figured
Waynes
out,
getting murdered.
yeah, or the Waynes are like, oh, we don't have to do that anymore. No, you don't. You didn't have to do that 2 or 3 movies ago. You didn't have to. So, there's some voiceover, or no, there's some cards at the beginning. Metahumans exist. There's a bunch of them. Superman is the strongest one. He just lost a fight, and now, he's bleeding in the Antarctic. That's all you need to know. And then, you establish that he's already has a relationship with Lois Lane. He's been raised by his parents. Lex Luthor is there. And there's a lot of good um, DNA in this movie of like what Superman is, more human than human, like that
Hmm.
idealistic of like, this is, what we should all aspire to, the, consideration, the kindness, the justice, the truth, and all of those things. To the point where, like, those 50s kind of like hokey values. But yeah, that's what Superman is. And that's what makes him such a compelling character, especially when you're in a cynical world. And it was. And James Gunn made sure he surrounded him with a bunch of cynical people, including horrible ones like, Lex Luthor literally trying to kill him and, enslave the
Hmm.
world. But it had like a nice, refreshing tone. I mean, honestly, it was the best Superman movie since Superman 2 with Christopher Reeve.
Wow.
It was because as you know, there have been a lot of terrible Superman movies in the interim. And this kind of got us back to like, basics, the DNA of the character. I've always said like with comic book characters, especially with comedy film nerds, was that you can go and do whatever you want with these stories and characters if you keep the DNA
Hmm.
and you keep it interesting and you keep the core DNA that makes these characters iconic in who they are. And some creators take that seriously, some of them don't. And you could see like the difference in the films. Like was Batman: The Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan's Batman movies, were they complete canon to the books and everything else? Of course not.
Hmm.
But they kept the core DNA of the character, and that made it so incredible and compelling, including with the Joker. So this movie does that. There's a lot of cool cameos of other superheroes and other characters. There's a million Easter eggs.
Hmm.
You just pass like a sign. It's like, tunnel to Gotham and, things like that.
Of
So it
course, of
ties everything
course.
together. A lot of different, kind of like deep cut DC characters. And, I'm like, I think that's James Gunn's brother as Maxwell Lord. I'm like, yes, of course it is. So it's a fun time at the movies. And what I like about it is James Gunn's moving things back to superhero movies, especially for DC, being fun. And they should
Hmm.
be fun. They're literally superhero movies. Not everything needs to be dark as Batman. Okay,
Yeah.
you can make it Batman dark, but you don't give Superman that same treatment. You
Right.
just don't. So it's a good start of things to come in the James Gunn universe, and
Hmm.
we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but I saw a great
Hmm.
tweet over the weekend. I'm going to see the movie in 2 days. I'm
Hmm.
really psyched about it. I've been trying to avoid as many, posts and tweets and such about it,
Yeah.
as trying to stay away from spoilers as much as I can. But the best tweet I saw was someone said, "I saw Superman this weekend. All I can say is thank you, Dwayne Johnson." Because for anyone who saw Black Adam, I think all we can say is, "Oh, you have my sympathies." Oh,
Yeah.
that was the final nail in the coffin. But okay,
Yes.
but we're speaking of comics, so we are here to talk to Chris about his new graphic novel, Long Ago and Far Away 2, Part One.
Yes.
So Chris, before we get into the book, let's talk a little bit about Chris Mancini, the writer. So this
Hmm.
again, so it's part two, and I actually had to give myself a refresher course by reading Long Ago and
Yes.
Far Away, the first one, which is a lot thicker. So what is the genesis of this whole story, this whole world that you created?
It started with like I always had this idea of like I love the Narnia stories, I love Tolkien, I love like classic fantasy stories, and I always thought, well, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. What if whatever happened to those kids after they came back to our world and they grew up and then they ended up being 30-year-old jerks and then they had to go back in that world again? Like, would they make things worse or would things be weirder or would they, not be able to find the hero to be the heroes that they once were? And that was basically the premise of it, to kind of turn fantasy a bit on its ear. There's wish fulfillment. There's, of course, the sexy witch queen and all of the stuff that we grew up with reading fantasy novels and all playing RPGs and all of that stuff that's in this book. Basically, I mean, if I have to give somebody an elevator pitch of like, what is this? Well, it's kind of
Mhm.
like, Clerks meets Narnia. So that's that's how I can describe it, very succinctly. But the interesting thing when I was writing it is I kind of wanted to make it like a comedy, fantasy comedy of these characters somewhere like a portal fantasy where they don't belong. But as I was writing it, it ended up becoming more and more personal and more in depth with the characters and what we were deconstructing and what was really going on with this world and what was the inner journey that everyone was all taking, which kind of surprised me a little bit as I was writing because I didn't really set out that way. But the more I rewrote it and the more deeper I kind of made the character, especially the protagonist, Jason, the more I liked it and the more I knew I was kind of on the right track. And it's always kind of like been one of those, even though there's, witches, dragons, naked wise men and ice worms and black knights, it is still a very personal story, especially
Mhm.
for me, about regaining your childhood wonder and if when we become adults when we leave that childhood wonder behind that we always got from stories, can we regain it? Is that a part of us that's lost forever, or is it something that we shouldn't be putting aside that we need as adults? So we kind of like explored a lot of those questions in the book, but in a funny way. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things, so like I said, I reread book one, and then
hmm
I read book two, part one.
hmm
What I thought was really impressive is that the world of it's Elvenwood,
hmm
so the fantasy world and the rules they're established really quickly, as if they were created by someone very familiar with this kind of storytelling. So I guess it's almost as if, okay, Chris wants to create this world, and he knows what it should be. But as you said earlier, kind of like turning fantasy on its ear, that you just kind of were able to put your own spin, your own version of this that worked best with the story. Now, was that something that took time to develop, or is it something you were able to just, you had an idea when you started, just like, this is what it's going to be?
Honestly, it took time to develop. There was a lot of different versions of it, and there was a lot of kind of different like directions I was kind of going. The premise never changed. It was always like this is a kind of funny, cool premise, but as you know, as a writer, the devil is in the details.
Hmm.
When you start to go, well, what motivates this character? What is the conflict? What are they trying to? What does every character want, and what do they want out of it? I mean, you've got the classic tropes, but then you also have more complicated goals and things like that. And why are we like refusing the call to adventure? Well, we're not refusing it. We're hanging up and we're leaving. We're closing the door. And so It's also like, the hero's journey also kind of, turned on its ear as well. So
Yeah.
but it definitely, it's when you read like a comic book, especially like a graphic novel, they go pretty quick as you read them, and it's like when you watch a movie, it's like, oh, well, that was an hour and a half. But, it takes years to,
Hmm.
craft that, that small amount of art. And this one, probably I rewrote a lot. I do remember doing it, but I was happy. But you're on the right track when every rewrite makes it better. You're like, okay, well, this is the right direction.
Yeah, oh, it's interesting you mentioned the hero's journey because I was thinking that, especially reading book one, that
Hmm.
I was reminded to have several scenes where the hero is literally saying, "I don't want to be here. I want to go
Yes.
home." So you're talking about like a literal refusal of the
Yes.
call, and it just takes the developing circumstances for him to eventually come around. And you also touched on this briefly, is that did you see putting the story together overall? Was it just a way of kind of having fun with the tropes and the cliches of these fantasy stories? And I have to ask, were there any that you are particularly proud of, or maybe like readers have singled them out? Like the one that stands out for me, and I think you touched on this briefly, is that he has this like one-on-one with the evil witch queen, and he's like, "Hey, you're pretty hot." And it's
Yeah.
like, oh my, I was like, my God, you would not see that in any other kind of
No.
traditional fantasy story.
Yeah, and it was like it was kind of like that male wish fulfillment whenever you would read about these stories and how amazingly attractive and hot the Witch Queen was. But with the thing that if you go a little bit deeper on that, you go with the femme fatales of the movies in the 40s and 50s. But if you go even deeper and further back, this is some things I picked up. It's actually in C.S. Lewis's book, in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Narnia series, because what he wanted to do specifically is show that evil was attractive and that you can actually be seduced and subdued to, essentially the dark side, but with
Hmm.
beauty. And in the first book, The Magician's Nephew, I'm going a very deep dive now, is that the uncle who met the Witch Queen always would refer to her as a damn fine woman, and because he was smitten with how attractive she was, even obviously the horrifically evil is these people. But I wanted to play around with that a little bit too, how evil is seductive, and that can get you into trouble even more than a monster is
Hmm.
somebody that's attacking you. So I that's another way, like I was kind of playing with tropes, but the tropes existed in different ways already. I was just kind of twisting them around a little bit. And then, his I don't want to give too many spoilers, but his dalliance with the Witch Queen is the impetus of course, the next arc in book two.
I was going to say it leads
Yeah.
into this. I
Yes.
had totally forgotten that at the end of book one, you have, I think, like two or three pages
Yes.
where the hero and his significant other are at a comic convention, and
Hmm.
this big muscled guy with an eye patch and a big broadsword comes in and says, "Father, don't you recognize me?" It's like,
Yes.
and then I looked, then I started reading book two. I was like, "Oh my God, these are the exact same pages,"
Yes.
and I was like, "Oh my gosh, he knew back then what he was all set to do for book two."
Yes, yeah, and it just takes a really long time to make these, but yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely had it set up. The only thing I was talking to my artist about this, he's like, "Are you going to do that again?" I said no, because then I have to definitely figure out a way exactly how those 5 pages fit into the story. Like I might have had like broad strokes at the time when I
Hmm.
did those, but if you actually make the pages. Then you're kind of dedicated to actually fitting them in. But luckily I knew where I was going on that specific scene, so I was able to fit everything in. But the the second part, part two, well, I should say long ago and far away to part one is what you have in your hand. It's actually going to be 3 parts, but I
Oh.
couldn't I couldn't kill the artist, or he would have killed me, to give him like 240 pages of a
No.
comic book script.
Yeah.
And I think he forgot to, because I sent him part two. And he goes, I thought it was going to end at the end, but then it kept going. I said, yeah, I know. It ends on another cliffhanger. There's still a third part. I think he forgot. So the part two is going to be basically, it's going to be called Son of Elvenwood, and then it'll be 240 pages. But I have to break it up into Kickstarters just to make it a little more
Sure.
manageable. And
Hmm.
one of the things I'm doing now is that because thankfully the company is doing better now, White Cat Entertainment. I want to. make it shorter between pledging and delivering of the books, even though
Mm,
these books are longer. Like a lot of people can deliver books quicker because they're only doing like 20, 30 pages sometimes. But, when you're doing like 80 to 100, it takes a lot longer. So I'm actually not doing the next campaign until the book is probably going to be about 75% done. So right now the layouts are done. We're working on inks now.
mhm.
And then when we get to like probably colors and lettering, that's when I'll probably launch the Kickstarter. So this sounds ridiculous, but I want to cut a year off the waiting time for the
Because I was going to
next
say
book.
that I will admit, I've contributed to both the first book and also to uh, it's weird to say part two, part
Yes.
one.
Yes.
And that, yeah, I think I can't even remember when the second
Mhm.
campaign ended.
Mhm.
Maybe
Yes.
maybe 2 years ago,
About a year and a half.
year and a
Yeah,
half ago.
yeah.
Okay,
So yeah, I'm trying to say like volume two, part one, and then maybe
okay,
that can kind of
that works. Yeah, that
but
works.
yeah, and like with the other thing too is you as we're doing that, then I have to have more catch-up tiers that, have more of the
Sure,
pieces before.
sure.
But what I might do too is like when I do part three, I might not do part three. I did this before as a separate book where part three will actually be the collected version. So as a business owner, you only want to do maybe one printing instead of two
Hmm.
because you're going to do a collected edition anyway with everything's together. I might actually skip one of those printings. So I might go, like I said, part one is done and out. Part two still be part two, but then part three will actually be the collected edition. So at a discounted rate. I'm not completely sure yet. I'll have to talk to the artist, but I think that might make the most sense.
So like a long ago and far away omnibus.
Yes.
So everything in one volume.
Yeah, yeah. So it's easier to manage and like, oh, I'm
Uh,
missing, not missing anything.
Okay, we do want to take one quick sidetrack here. That one of the
Hmm.
things I did notice with part two is that the quality of your artist Fernando Pinto, it's much more detailed and more refined in the second book than it was in the first book. I mean, is he spending a little more time on the art? Because I mean, art in the first book was great, but the second one I just noticed, especially I think there's a couple the first pages as I started reading, it just seems much more I don't know refined.
Yeah.
And is that is something that the two of you have discussed, or that's just his style has developed over time?
That's actually what it is. I mean, he actually said the exact same thing to me. He said, because as artists, we strive to improve, and that includes, writing, art, whatever we do. And
Hmm.
he said, like, when he was going back to actually look at the character designs and all of those things to start, volume two, part one. And he said that like this exactly what you said, like, the art's a little different now because he's, become a lot more refined in his own work.
Hmm.
And you can see it too in his other books as well. Like as because, I get jealous when he works for other writers, but still, I can see it in his other books as well. Like he's just become like a really refined artist. He's really kind of found his tone and style. And yeah, I mean, I even said that the same thing to him. I said, I see a real improvement. I said, not that the first one was bad or anything. It was
Yeah.
still really good, but I see like an improvement in the second book for sure. So absolutely, his work has gotten just gets better and better with every book.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
Mhm.
One of the things I thought was particularly effective overall for both books was the presentation of information, backstories, explanations, etc. Now, what I was thinking is you don't overstay the welcome in each panel. So was this typical of your writing style when you started, or did that take time to develop?
That actually took a little time because it's a balancing act. Like you have, all right, well, I don't want to give too much information, but if I don't give enough, people are going to be lost. And that's one of the things I actually did talk to an editor about, and she kind of gave me some tips as well here and there. Like especially if you're breaking up one big book into three, like there still has to be kind of like a little bit of a catch up here and there,
Hmm.
so people know, including like, character names, things like that. So it was deliberate, and it's definitely trying to find the balance. I mean, it sounds like we got pretty close, so that's good. And but yeah, for sure, as writers, especially in a visual medium like that, because people are buying comics all different times, and they come out and very sporadically. You have to make sure you have like that kind of connective tissue from book to book to make sure people aren't lost.
I definitely get that. I also appreciate it, as we've talked about a lot. Uh, it's a story in some ways doesn't take itself seriously. There's an abundance of jokes and just, comical situations. But I also thought you did a really good job of knowing when to focus on the serious and or the relevant material. Now, is that part of your overall approach to writing, or is that just something that was really specific to this story?
It was it's like a when you play a video game, you have those resource slider bars. You're like, poignancy, humor, one goes up, maybe one goes down at some point. So just the mix of this story, I tried to actually, cheat and put both of them up pretty high of like comedy and poignancy. And as I was writing and developing, especially like with volume two, there's an underlying theme of the different stages of our life. And the first volume is kind of about, childhood's end when we stop being kids and we become adults, whether we want to or not, and all of the things we kind of have to go through to get there. But are we also, when we do that, are we leaving our childhood sense of wonder behind? The second volume is about starting a family and having kids, and obviously a very bizarre and weird way where because time passes differently, Jason's kid is like 20 years older than him and wants to kill him. So, but at the same time, the themes of having a family and putting family first, all of those things will actually be there. And then as you know, depending on how far we get, volumes after that will deal with like kind of looking back on your life and things like that. So I've always set this up as a trilogy, possibly more of the different stages of our life told through a comedic fantasy lens.
Yeah, sure. Did you ever write a scene and then think, okay, this needs more jokes, or think, okay, there's too many jokes. I have to pull back on that, and I have to maybe ramp up the seriousness or the drama of, or even like looking for a scene. Okay, this needs more conflict.
That's interesting. It's like I kind of like have in my head, this is going to be a funny scene. This is going to be a heartfelt scene. And I don't really go back and forth that way. But what I do go back and forth with is how can this joke be funnier? Or how can this emotional scene be more emotional? And how can I do it in less words? And how can I do it visually? And so it's more along the lines of like I know what I want to do in the scene, but how can I make it more so and make it better specifically to where it's going.
Okay. We already talked about, because one of my questions was the time frame for part two, but
Hmm. Yeah.
volume two, part two. You already addressed
Yes.
that. So we also touched on this briefly, that all of your graphic novels are the result of crowdfunding.
Yes.
And as people are well familiar, and you are as well, I did a crowdfunding for my short film, which is now entering the
Hmm.
post-production phase.
Yes.
So, as someone who has
Happy to
gone,
back it.
oh, I appreciate it. Every dollar helps, believe me.
Yeah.
And then some. So the big question is, so what helpful tips would you have for someone, especially because I've seen this a lot on Kickstarter and Indiegogo and Seed and Spark. A lot of people are doing crowdfunding to raise funds to make comics. Maybe not a graphic novel, but they want to make like a
Right.
four-issue limited series type of thing.
Hmm.
Are there any tips or guidance that you would offer up for people to say, this is what you should do, and also things you should not do?
Well, one of the things, especially with crowdfunding, and if it's a new medium to you, like I say, it's your first comic, start small. Don't make my mistake, which was to do a 180-page graphic novel first. So because you can make your mistakes on the smaller pages, the smaller amounts of pages, rather than a massive book, because it'll take a lot more time. There's a couple of things. The other thing is that crowdfunding is a community, especially in specific genres, like say, comic books. A lot of people kind of know each other, and we talk and we help and we support each other. And what somebody looking at a new campaign will do first is see how many other campaigns they've supported in the community. And so it's really important to not just show up, put your project there, and then leave and hope you get like $10,000.
Hmm.
It's just not really the way it's going to work. You have to be involved and engaged in the community. You have to support other creators. And well, now the good news on that is once you get your first one done, you'll have a group of people that like your work and support it. And then when you do your next one, you can add to that and add to that and add to that. I mean, there's always going to be drop off, obviously, but
Mhm.
the more, you can add and the more the people like your work. And that's really how you can achieve some steady growth. So start small, engage with the community and, don't be afraid to make mistakes. The other thing that not many people talk about is with crowdfunding, sometimes you look at like a book and you look at the goal and you go, well, there's no way they're going to be able to make the book for that amount of money or make the movie for that amount of money. And one of the tricks with crowdfunding is you sometimes they start the goal a little lower than what they actually need because then it looks like it funded faster and people can it's a psychological thing and people can
Mhm.
kind of get on board more. That's fine to do that. However, you have to understand that if you're deliberately putting in a deficit for your budget, you have to make sure you have that to be able to actually finish your project because the one thing that'll kill you in crowdfunding is if you make your goal and then you never deliver a your book or movie or reward, and then people will not give you another chance to take their money and not deliver anything. So it's perfectly fine to start small, put a small goal, but know that if you get that small goal and that's it, and you still need another $2,000, you have to maybe have that saved or find that from somewhere else because there's always shipping and
Mhm.
there's always Kickstarter fees and there's always some expense, especially with production
Oh
when you're
yeah.
making a film that you're not going to expect. So you have to have a small contingency budget in place for that. Now, this could be irrelevant. Let's say your project goes gangbusters, then great. You think, oh, well, I just made, $80,000. But you also have to remember that, that's a ton more backers and a ton more printing and a ton more postage and all.
Hmm.
You have to kind of scale that in as well. Like, if you make 80,000, but then it costs you 84,000 to print and ship, you still haven't made made a lot of progress. But um, so you want to kind of look at all of those numbers for sure.
Yeah, I've found that even though even if you get a part of your goal, it's still not enough. That's really
Yes.
what it comes down to.
Yeah.
That there's, as you said, there are always a lot of unseen expenses or
Hmm.
unexpected
Hmm.
expenses. This thing you thought was going to cost this much turns out it's twice as much, which eats away
Right.
from the stuff
Hmm.
you'd have put aside for this other thing. So
Yep.
there's a lot of trying to figure things out, and sometimes there's some last minute scrambling
Yeah.
to cover costs.
And then there's all sorts of things that you don't even expect, like tariffs and paper shortages and all
Mm.
of these things that could affect costs that weren't there when you ran your campaign, but they're there now for fulfillment. You're like, geez, this is another $2,000. How am I going to do this? So the one advice I'll give to any creative and that is that there is no side hustle. It's just hustle. So to whatever
Mm.
you're doing, whether you're doing contract work, you're making comic books, you're making, a film or whatever, there's no such thing as like, well, I got to make my money here and, I'm not making money creative, so I'm not really creative. No, it all goes into the same pool. It all goes into you. So if you can work harder in a job that you may not necessarily like, but to give you more freedom and flexibility to create your art, that all counts, that's all valuable, and you'll find it actually makes things easier for you in the long run.
Mhm. Yeah, and one of the things the director I was working with in my short film, she's made several shorts, and so
Hmm.
she's also experienced crowdfunding as well. And she said that when I was just about to launch the campaign, she said, just so you know, this is almost going to become a second full-time job for you. That you are going to
Yes.
be looking at this every day, multiple times.
Hmm.
Did somebody donate? Did somebody donate? It's like when
Yeah.
you get that email, such and such donated $25. Woo! Yeah,
Yep.
that's it's a little bit further to what I'm working towards, and it wasn't stressful for the most
Hmm.
part, but it definitely became all like borderline obsessive for me.
Yes.
Just kind of like, okay. And also while the funds were slowly trickling in, I was trying to figure, okay, this I've got this covered now. Now what do I have to focus on next? It's almost like a never-ending list of things that need
Hmm.
to be taken care of, and what do I still need work on, and what can I safely cover? And it's not exhausting, but mighty darn close to it.
Yes, yeah. The only saving grace to that is that you're like, well, this is 30 days. I've got to, this is a sprint. Crowdfunding is a sprint. It's not really a marathon. Overall, it's a marathon when you do multiple crowdfundings, but each
Mm.
one is
Yeah.
is a sprint. So you've got that 30 days to make the goal.
Okay. Well, okay. Chris, I also want to ask you really quick. I know that, so for people who are watching on YouTube, he's got his company logo behind him on the shoulder. It is a
Mhm.
cartoon cat with a jetpack.
Yes.
And so I understand that there's a new development that people have always had questions about that particular cat. They say, come on, you're a comic book company. Aren't you going to do something with it? And you can
Yes.
say,
Yes, I said, now we've finally done it. And it was the weirdest thing where, like, I've always loved the logo. Fernando came up with the logo, and we would be at comic book conventions. And the first time it happened, another creator actually came up to me and goes, "Where's his book?" I said, "What are you talking about? His book? The A Cat with a Jetpack." I would read that, and then kids would come up afterwards and say, "Well, is this where's his book?" And I realized that I think maybe we need to make a book. So I called Fernando. I said, "Would you be down with making a Cat with a Jetpack book?" And he said, "Absolutely." So it was a very short conversation. So I think maybe he was thinking the same thing. So we're going to be debuting Alpha Cat at San Diego Comic-Con in about 2 weeks. And it will be what's called an ashcan version. So it's about, 8 pages plus covers, and inside covers will be so 12-ish. But it'll be free. So you can
Oh,
actually
okay.
come to the table and bring something to get signed, but also you can get a free ash can of Alpha Cat, and we're really happy with how it came out. It's like super dynamic and fun, and we're setting it up as like a Star Trek in space, but for animals. So we have all the different animals on the ship and going down to explore planets, and there's been a big war with the insect imperium with the against the animals, and it's kind of fun to kind of go back and forth, like because I've done some horror stuff and I've done kind of PG-13, but to do kind of like a Disney kind of Pixar like that kind of like tween-ish book like that, it's actually been really fun, and it's bright and colorful, and we're really excited about it. We think that we'll either get it picked up or publish it on our own. We're open to a couple of different avenues to get it to market.
Okay, and what if for those of us poor unfortunate souls who are not able to come to San Diego, is it going to be available on the White Cat Entertainment website?
It will act right now. It's actually available on the White Cat Entertainment Patreon, like at the $5 level. I just put it up as a digital download, so you could grab it there now. It's the White Cat Entertainment Adventurers Club. So if you if you join that for like $5, then you could get it there. But also, I'll probably put it up at the on the website eventually. I still have to put up Long Gone Far Away Volume 2 Part 1. I haven't done that yet either.
Wow.
And this is like small businessy type stuff that, we have to go through. Like my entire store got like hacked. So
Mm.
I had to actually shut it down, but it's back up now. But I was like, come on, I'm like a small independent, publisher. Why would you attack my store? Um, but hackers just see like, oh, exploit, let me go
Hmm.
in and try to um do something with the credit cards or whatever. But yeah, and the other thing is that with the books now, you can get them on Amazon, you can get them on my website, but also I just signed a publishing arrangement with Massive Publishing, which has been really cool. So all of the books will now be available in comic book stores starting
Oh.
in the fall.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So
Congrats.
really, really, thank you. Really excited. It's been a long time coming, trying to find the right fit and the right publisher. Some of them want to take all these rights. Some of them
Hmm.
are like, all right, well, then I have to give you what for, $800? Then that's what I'm going to make. That doesn't make sense. And I'll give a lot of credit to Michael Calero and Massive over there. They created like a nice model for basically indie comic book companies where, you can kind of use their pass through and their distribution, as a kind of like they're curating companies and titles that they want to help get out there for distribution. So it's exactly what I was looking for because I do everything in house. Like I hire the artist, I make the books, and I fund everything myself. So that's really the piece that I was missing. But the one thing I will say, there's 1,000 different ways to do what you want to do. If you want to pitch or collaborate, find an artist that you might, want to just become partners with. You could self-publish. There's Global Comics, there's Amazon, and there, if you just want to do digital, there's Drive-Through Comics and all of these places you can go. So don't think that like there's just one way to make like or any art right now. There's a lot of different pathways to get your work out there now.
Okay, that is fantastic, Chris. Always a pleasure to talk with you. And again, if you love fantasy and you love comedy, go for the long ago and far away books. There's book one, and now there's volume two, part one. That was
Yes.
easy. That was easy to say.
Yeah.
Okay, and we did mention it. So, Chris, where can people get the books if they want to order them straight away?
They can actually go to whitecatentertainment.com and I will sign them for you if you buy from my website. But if you just want to kind of do Amazon, all the Long Gone Far Away and Rise of the Kung Fu Dragon Master are actually on Amazon Prime, so you could grab them there as well. In addition to I think Kindle as well. But if you want to, see me in person and get books signed by myself and Fernando, who's coming in from Chile for San Diego Comic-Con,
Oh,
so we'll be
wow.
at the same table for the first time, maybe ever. We'll be at Small Press 010. And we're doing something really weird. I don't know what if it's kind of silly, but we're gonna try it. Is if someone shows up to Comic-Con to our table and is cosplaying as one of the White Cat Entertainment characters from any of the books, including Alpha Cat, which isn't out yet, but that would be hilarious if someone did that.
Hmm.
Just came up dressed as a cat in a jetpack it would be amazing. So they will get a free book pack, and Fernando will do a free art commission for them.
Wow.
So
That is a bargain. Okay, so the website is whitecatentertainment.com and
yes.
any other social media that you can feel free to plug.
Yeah, there's a Facebook page for I think it's White Cat Stories, and then on Twitter it's White Cat Stories, and then I think but on Instagram I think it was taken, so it's like White Cat Stories one. I think I had to
Wow.
do on Instagram. I'm not sure, um, but and then I think I'm on Blue Sky as well. I just haven't checked it in a while. You can check White Cat Entertainment there as well.
Okay, if someone already had White Cat
I
stories,
know, right?
that's really they must have seen the potential and said, "I'm going to
Yeah.
snatch that up right away." All right. So okay, we've been talking with Chris Mancini about his graphic novel, Long Ago and Far Away, Volume 2, Part 1, and
Yes.
he's all the details are at whitecatentertainment.com. Uh, Chris, once again, thank you so much for being here today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Paul. And also, I'll give you a plug as well. I've always had a great time at the San Francisco Writers Conference that you program a track there. It's always a great time. If you're a writer and you're in the area, you should definitely check it out.
No, thank you. Yeah, we are starting to get ready for next year's conference. That'll be in February. I believe it's President's Weekend. That's when it usually is. We're hoping to have Chris back as one of our panelists. He'll be part of the Writing for Hollywood track. Those are always
Mhm.
great. And if you want to know more about screenwriting or just about writing in general, it is a great conference to attend. And it is in beautiful downtown San Francisco in February. So it might
Yes.
rain. So that's the best we can tell you. Viewers and listeners, if you enjoyed today's show, please hit like. Feel free to leave a comment and subscribe. Social media, you can check out my screenwriting blog at maximumz.blog. For Twitter, I'm at maximum_z. Blue Sky and Instagram, it's at Pez Screenwriting. And this show has its own accounts. Twitter, it's odd and Twitter and Blue Sky at podcast CWL. And for my Go Ahead and Ask books, those are the ones on Amazon. Like I said, that's Chris. I'm Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.